The good news that I feel like I want to share at the federal level and people out in the world is that most people are good and decent and kind, and that persuasion is still possible. Politics can still result in progress if we are willing to have those conversations. We can still tap people's better angels if we are first willing and able to genuinely see them.
Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast focused on incredibly talented people who've dedicated themselves to public service when their country and communities needed it the most. I'm Ryan Coonerty. Along with Debbie Cox-Bolton of the NewDEAL, I'm lucky enough to be your co-host. The NewDEAL is an organization that supports the next generation of American leaders. Check out newdealleaders.org to find out more.
Today's podcast is a very special one. NewDEAL is celebrating our 15th anniversary, and to mark the occasion, Ryan and I were thrilled to be joined by Delaware Congresswoman Sarah McBride, a NewDEAL alum and an incredibly inspiring leader. We asked the Congresswoman to look back over the past 15 years, and in fact, the arc of history over America's 250 years, and what both can teach us about the current moment. Congresswoman McBride talked about governing during tumultuous times, and the conflict between builders and destroyers, about her work, often in a bipartisan way, to bring down the cost of living and empower people to succeed, as well as her belief in a politics of grace over grievance. Thinking about her time spent with NewDEAL, the Congresswoman noted how important thoughtful, pragmatic leaders like those in NewDEAL have been and will continue to be over the next 15 years. Congresswoman McBride has not always had an easy path, but she never complains. She approaches her work with wonder, humility, and gratitude, and a laser focus on delivering for her constituents. She ends our conversation with a powerful message to all of us who are lucky enough to work in and around government and politics when the stakes are so high. She reminds us that democracy is not supposed to be easy, and that there continues to be more that unites us than divides us if we're willing to show up and truly see one another. We hope you enjoy the conversation, and for more information about NewDEAL as we celebrate 15 years, please visit newdealleaders.org/15th. Congresswoman Sarah McBride, thank you so much for joining us on Honorable Profession.
It's so good to be back.
We're so happy to have you. This is such a special episode for us as we are celebrating 15 years at NewDEAL, which is just crazy to think about. And we were talking a little bit before the show and talking about how much Delaware has had an impact on NewDEAL and the country, of course. But Brian Short, who works with you now, was literally one of the first 10 NewDEAL leaders when we launched NewDEAL when he was in the legislature. Jack Markell, governor, was one of our honorary co-chairs. And of course, Joe Biden has been a friend and both to NewDEAL and, of course, the impact he's had on this country. So we're just talking about the Delaware magic before you came on and thinking through those 15 years. So I guess just to dive in with a softball kind of question, as you think about 15 years, you take a step back and you're thinking about where we've been as a country with Barack Obama and Joe Biden and now 2 times Trump, and your own kind of rise, coming of age and rise into politics. Like, what do you think? What do you think about the last 15 years in American politics and where we find ourselves?
Well, first of all, let me just say, when you find thoughtful, effective leaders, you will find Delawareans present. We are a good, decent, and pragmatic people. And whether it's Jack Markell, Brian Short, who's now, as you mentioned, my district director, Chris Coons, NewDEAL Delaware connection runs deep.
That's
and
right.
As someone who is very familiar with Delaware, it is not surprising at all. Look, I think that, reflecting on the last 15 years in our politics, I'll just start by saying I think it only reinforces the need for NewDEAL leaders, because I think what we have seen over the last 15 years is this growth of cynicism and hopelessness in our politics, rooted in the fear that we no longer have the individual or collective capacity to meet the scope and the scale of the challenges that we face. And in that culture of cynicism and hopelessness, you have essentially one of two outcomes for a person. Either they give up and they opt out of the system entirely, or they fall prey to strong men with simple solutions, with soundbite ideas, who come in and say, I alone can fix it. And that is, I think, why we have seen this rise in nationalism and faux populism in our politics, in our country, in the sort of global liberal democratic order, because of that growing crisis of hope that people are feeling. And the only way to inoculate our world to that cynicism and to that hope is to prove to people that democracy can still deliver for them. It's to make government work. It's to build a government that sees and respects everyone by meeting their needs. But in order to do that, you need to have people who are willing, ready, and able to do the hard work of governing, to do the hard work of democracy, to roll up their sleeves, dive into the details, bring people together to deliver real, tangible, meaningful, and lasting change. And that's one of the things I love about New Deal leaders, is that that's precisely who they are. The kinds of leaders who know how to make government work. And whether at the local, state, or for those of us who have moved to the federal level and are technically no longer New Deal leaders, we're alum, that is the type of leader that is going to help to chart a path forward. Because I think in this moment, in this culture of cynicism and hopelessness, the divide in our politics is no longer left or right. It's really between builders and destroyers. And I think that this is an inflection point that we face every 80 years or so in this country. And I think with New Deal leaders, you've got builders. You've got people who reject the option to destroy our sense of commonality, our sense of hope in the possibilities in our politics, who reject the effort to destroy our Constitution and our democracy even, and rather want to build a more perfect union.
I love that, builders versus destroyers. I love that. I think that's exactly right.
Following up on that, I mean, you were selected to the New Deal when you were a state senator in Delaware, and every state has its challenges, but it was a functioning state government that was focused on getting things done. You've now transitioned to Washington, D.C., where there's a lot more destruction than building going on. And I guess I'd like you to reflect on what are the differences, and then what's the possibility for our DC politics to get back to building?
Well, it certainly has been quite a transition from the state level to the federal level, but I'm good at transitions. So I am able to adapt to the best of them. Look, I mean, when I was in Dover, I was in a Democratic trifecta with a supermajority in a state that really requires a supermajority in order to do anything of meaning with revenue. But we were able to get really big things done. We were able to raise the minimum wage. We were able to pass my paid family and medical leave bill. We were able to pass, the last thing I did in the state legislature was the largest ongoing investment into the state's Medicaid program since the ACA passed. We were able to do that. And we were able to do big things. And in many cases, we were able to do big things by building bridges. Nearly every bill that I introduced and passed, including big controversial bills from gun safety to paid leave to expanding access to healthcare, nearly every bill that I introduced and passed was passed with bipartisan support. And that takes a majority that's willing to work in a bipartisan fashion. That takes a majority that's willing to feel the weight and the responsibility that comes with governing. And I think that weight and that responsibility should lead us to engage in policymaking with a degree of humility, that we don't know everything, that we do not have a monopoly on good ideas, and that collaborative progress is more durable progress. And obviously at the federal level, we've got a majority here that is far less willing and interested in bipartisan collaboration. If they have the votes, they've got the votes, and everyone else be damned. And we also, of course, have here, instead of builders in control, we have destroyers, people who are wanting to destroy the American worker by unleashing unregulated technologies that leave the rich richer and everyone else behind. People who want to continue to facilitate the destruction of our attention spans and mine what little remains for advertising dollars, people who want to destroy government by dismantling agencies, gutting agencies, firing workers in an effort to make government not work so that they can prove that government doesn't work, and therefore lay the foundation to privatize and sell what remains for parts. We've got people who want to destroy our international institutions and international law in order to build a global order where the strong can plunder the weak. Um, we are governed in this moment by destroyers, and that means that a lot is at stake. But what isn't different is the need for us to maintain our willingness to collaborate and our sense of commonality, not just with one another across the ideological divide or partisan divide, but also with one another as neighbors out in the world. I think for me, one of the things that I am most disturbed by and fearful of, if that's the right word, is that in our politics in this moment, partly as a byproduct of the social media platforms we live on and the media we consume, we have sort of fallen into this false perception of reality where people are either 100% with us or 100% against us and nothing in between. And one of the blessings of being an elected official is that I actually get to go out into the real world, to touch grass, to get off the internet, and to have conversations with people who disagree with me about the things that they disagree with me on. And one of the blessings of that is that I actually get to see that we are not as divided as the algorithms make it seem in this moment, and that persuasion is still possible. And because when everything seems like everyone's either 100% with me or 100% against me, it can lead you to believe that the art of politics is pointless, that persuasion and conversation across disagreement will be fruitless. And that is dangerous for our democracy because democracy can only exist with a necessary ingredient, and that is our collective faith in other people's capacity to change. And the good news that I feel like I want to share at the federal level and the people out in the world is that most people are good and decent and kind, and that persuasion is still possible. Politics can still result in progress if we are willing to have those conversations. We can still tap people's better angels if we are first willing and able to genuinely see them.
And I know Debbie has a million questions about what you're hearing on the ground, because fundamentally that's what New Deal is about, right? Is about engaging people in the project of democracy. I guess I'm curious about your experience, because you not only have to lead in this incredibly difficult environment, have these conversations, but you are also under attack for who you are. I'm reminded of the famous quote about Ginger Rogers that she had to do all of Fred Astaire's dance moves, but backwards and in heels. And it feels like you have an additional burden placed on you that you have to rise to every day. And I guess, like, what's that been like, and how? What's your advice to people who are thinking about engaging in public service, but are also worried that they're going to have to do twice the work for twice the criticism?
Yeah. I mean, I think politics in today's day and age in a social media environment, I think it's sadly pretty brutal for everyone. I think obviously it is more brutal for some than others, but I think it's a pretty coarse and cruel business right now, which is part of the problem. And it's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to run for federal office, is because I believe that we have to have a politics of grace, not of grievance. And it is going to take people who are willing, in the moments where it's particularly hard, who are willing to summon that grace rather than just continue to descend our politics into this cycle of grievance. It's going to take people who are willing to summon that grace in that moment to get us out of this place and to get us out of that descent. And so hard things are hard, and I got into this knowing it was going to be hard. I don't think anyone can fully understand what it's like to be in this place unless you are serving in this place. But, the first thing that I will say is, for all of the extra things that come my way, I am genuinely in awe that I am here. I mean, I get to go to work in the room where slavery was abolished and where the 13th and 14th Amendment were passed. I get to go to work in the room where women got the right to vote. I get to go to the room where Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid were created. I sit in the chairs that people sat in when they voted to pass the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and I get to do it on behalf of what is objectively the greatest state in the union. And that is not some trite cliche politician line. Like, I genuinely deeply feel the weight and the honor and the privilege of being one of the 535 stewards of our democracy in this moment. For me, I knew that there would be people here who would seek to use my service as an opportunity to get attention. And part of my responsibility, and I'd always told people this, was not to give them the response that they wanted, to not take the bait. And to not do that, one, because when they're doing it for attention and you don't take the bait, they get less attention, which takes away the incentive to continue to come after you. And it's one of the reasons why over a year and 2 months, the indignities have decreased dramatically. The second is that my job is to be the best representative I can be for Delaware. And that is the only way that I can guarantee that while I may be a first, I'm not the last. And their goal was to render me ineffective at the start, to render me a caricature, and to reduce my service not to the issues that I campaigned on or I'm working on, but to something else entirely. And I refuse to give them that power. And in not taking the bait, it's actually made me even more effective. Sometimes when you're given lemons, you make lemonade. And the fact that I didn't take the bait, my Republican colleagues saw that. And many of them came up to me and not only warmly welcomed me to Congress, not only said, "I'm sorry that you're getting treated this way. It's not very Christian," but said, "Let's find opportunities to work together to show people that not everyone here is like that." And that has resulted in me, on behalf of my constituents, being able to introduce more bipartisan legislation than any other freshman this Congress. And then the final thing is, as a person whose rights and life is being debated right now, I know from the lessons of history, from the peaceful nonviolent movements throughout our history and across the world, that there is nothing more powerful for people to understand what side of an issue, what side of history they should be on, than the visual of unhinged hatred in contrast to calm, cool, and collected, dignified work of a person keeping their head held high and just continuing to walk forward to do the job that they are there to do.
I know, just amazing. I'm literally like choking back tears, but thank you for your calm, cool, collected work. And just pivoting a little bit, Congresswoman, to the work that you're doing in Delaware, what are you hearing from your constituents? What are they looking for in this moment? I feel like a lot of times you talked about that being the great thing is that you get to touch grass and actually hear what people are thinking and not live in the world of the social media. But that, and I'd love to hear about that. And I'm also would love to hear about kind of what people are saying about what Democrats need to do right now in this moment, how Democrats need to stand up and kind of what that feels like to you in terms of what issues are most on their mind and what kind of are they looking for Democrats to do in this particular moment in history.
So look, I hear from Democrats, just to start on that they want us to fight, but they want us to fight effectively. And I think that what we are actually seeing in a lot of primaries across the country right now is that Democrats are hungry for people to fight hard and fight smart. Yeah. I think they're hungry for us to reject the false distinction, the false division, the false choice between being bold and building bridges. I think we can do both, and they want us to do both. Look, every single day I'm out in Delaware, I hear from folks about the challenge that they face making ends meet. I hear from folks about the cost of groceries, the costs of energy bills, the cost of housing, the cost of healthcare. And the challenge in this moment of being able to have any hope that things will be better tomorrow than they are today, for yourself, for your kids, for your family, for your community. And again, I think all of those issues are interconnected, right? You can't protect the American experiment unless you make the American dream affordable and accessible for everyone. That is the foundation of this experiment, this 250-year experiment that we celebrate this year. And for me, that's what I've been laser focused on. I've been laser focused on building an economy that works for everyone, including lowering the cost of groceries by introducing legislation that protects our farmers, especially in Delaware, where poultry farming is our biggest agricultural industry and where it's too often resulting in family farmers being decimated by avian flu and a federal government that's not protecting our farmers. I'm working to protect our seniors from a lot of the scams that we're seeing perpetuate around the country, around the world right now, that are preying on our seniors, that are preying on people in debt. The first bill I introduced, bipartisan bill, week into Congress, I was the first freshman to introduce legislation. I introduced legislation to combat the predatory practices of so-called credit repair organizations that are preying on our neighbors, particularly folks who are already struggling, seniors, with these empty promises, large upfront fees, and no actual progress for their credit score or their credit report. I'm working on expanding access to kinds of benefits that a modern economy should be guaranteeing for a modern workforce. We have a 1950s care infrastructure for a 2026 workforce. And that's one of the reasons why I fought for and passed paid leave in Delaware. It's why here I'm the chair of the New Dems Care Economy Task Force, so that we build a cradle through career support system that lowers costs for families, improves outcomes for children, and allows our nation to tap the full potential of everyone, regardless of their family type or their gender or their family responsibilities, by guaranteeing paid family and medical leave nationwide, universal access to affordable, quality early childhood education. Because at the end of the day, those are policies that are not just compassionate, but make our country and our economy more competitive globally.
I love that. I would be remiss to not throw a couple more Delawareans in the mix here to say that we are so excited that we also just launched our Care Economy Task Force, including one of the co-chairs being your Lieutenant Governor, Kyle Gay, who's amazing.
I think maybe
I think you nominated her.
Yes.
I think that's right. That's right. Who is serving at the pleasure of Matt Meyer, the governor of Delaware, another New Deal leader. So really, we'll keep the Delaware string going through. But maybe if I could ask you a follow-up question, what you just said about what you're hearing. I mean, I could not agree with you more about our need to just focus on the things that matter most to people. We're also dealing with the flood the zone, the craziness every day, people wanting to pull us off of our message. And so I'm interested in both how you think about staying the course, and also I've heard you talk a lot about the need for Democrats to invite people to join us again, that we can't be wagging our fingers at people who may have supported Trump in the past, that essentially, if people don't agree with us on every single point, they still need to feel like they have a home with us. So both, how do we kind of stay on the path of a message that's what we should be focusing on, and how do we invite people back into the Democratic fold if we're going to be successful in 26 and 28?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the reality is that while there is a clear and intentional effort to flood the zone, we obviously, while we need to maintain a central focus, we also can't ignore injustice or harm, or in certain instances, we all know, literal murder in our streets when that is occurring, and we can't let that be normalized or allow it to go unchallenged. And I think that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. I think that it means not picking every battle, but picking the battles that are most acute, most urgent, and most needed in a particular moment. That's hard. And that doesn't mean that when we're not responding on a particular issue that we're not saying it's unimportant, but that ultimately, if we are going to protect all of the communities and types of and all of the folks that we're fighting for, which is everyone, we need to win. And in order to win, it means making sure we are building a broad coalition. I think it means one, when we are responding to these efforts to foment culture wars, that we are pulling the curtain back on what is a blatant and obvious political strategy, a strategy as old as politics itself, to divide and to misdirect the public's attention, and to reinforce for people every single time you see them going after immigrants, every single time you see them talking about trans people, look at what they're doing with their other hand, because I guarantee you in that exact same moment, they're picking the pocket of American workers, they're fleecing seniors, they're cutting healthcare, they're cutting food assistance. This is all part of a strategy, and we cannot separate these two issues because they are using them not only to try to misdirect the public's attention, but when they're cutting healthcare, when they're cutting food assistance, they are using that money as a piggy bank to fund their authoritarian machine that is murdering American citizens in the street, abridging due process, and seeking to abridge the freedom of anyone who lives or looks differently than Donald Trump and his cabinet and his billionaire donors. And so I think we have to be better at connecting all of those issues. And then finally, to your point around the need for us to grow our tent. Look, I think people want to feel like democracy is easy. That is just, it's not. And I think social media has sort of led us to believe that advocacy, that change making is easy, right? We get to say exactly what we want in the most, unfiltered way, and that's going to get us the most retweets and the most likes, and that's the measure of success, and that's pretty easy, right? Because we don't have to think about it. We get to say whatever we want, and we get to do whatever we want, and that is effective advocacy. That is change making, and that is just not the reality. Democracy is hard. It is not easy, and it is often unfair. It's imperfect, but it is the best form of government that we have to maximize opportunity and freedom for people, and to guarantee that every single person has what is the most foundational human hope, which is control over our own destiny. And I think as we recognize that democracy is hard, not as a bug of it, but as a feature of it. Because absolutism is only possible on the left or the right in authoritarianism. The fact that we have to have difficult conversations, the fact that we don't get everything we want in one foul swoop in an instant, also means that not only our opponents don't get everything they want in one foul swoop, it means that our freedoms and the protections of the minority, including the political minority, are still in place. And that is the foundation. That is the feature, not the bug of democracy. And as we look to win, as we look to win political power, as we look to do the hard work of democracy, we have to recognize that that means not the comfort of simply preaching to our own choir, but the courage to grow our congregation. Because at the end of the day, democracy is math. And if we continue to tell people that you have to be with us 100% of the time, or at least 100% of the time on the certain issues that we predetermined are the threshold issues for us, then we are going to have a wonderfully morally pure self-righteous club at the gulag we've been sent off to. Right? Like, we have to do this work of building a governing majority, a multiracial, working class, diverse coalition that can win and can win everywhere, so that we can deliver for everyone.
I always tell my students that, everything online is built to be frictionless, except democracy it's for nothing but friction, right? Yes. And so you have to change the mindset. I guess a year from now, there'll be 100 crises between now and then, but let's assume that you're back in the majority in the House and the Senate is close, but President Trump is still in the White House. What does the agenda look like to start rebuilding that trust, to start making people's lives better, but then also laying the groundwork for 2028?
So, look, I think it sort of falls into three categories. The first is, obviously we have to hold this administration accountable. We've got to make sure that they have to answer to the American people and to us as representatives of the American people. I was just in a House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing on a topic not specifically about the elephant in the room, which is the fact that we are in an unauthorized and reckless war in Iran right now. And we're having hearings about important other topics, but yet have not had a hearing yet specifically on even why we're at war. And so obviously we have to hold this administration to account. The second is we've got to grapple with the pre-existing corruption in our politics. The fact that we are able as members of Congress to trade stocks and profit off of the information that we have. The fact that we have unlimited, unfettered money in our politics. All of these corrosive dynamics that have existed long before the current administration or are worse under the current administration, but predate them. We have to tackle those. And I think HR1 is going to be a really democracy-saving set of solutions to make sure that we have truly free and fair elections in our country that prioritizes the voter's voice rather than the voice of the wealthy few. And then finally, of course, we have proposals that not only reverse the harm of this current administration, which time and time again has broken their promises to lower costs for working people. We not only have to reverse as best as we can the cuts to healthcare and food assistance and medical research, the list goes on, but we've got to start to find opportunities where we can move the country forward. I have a bill that I'm going to be introducing in the coming weeks to hopefully guarantee that the federal government is funding and facilitating the kind of housing development that is smart, balanced, and meets the actual needs of working people in this country. We've got to put forward that cradle through career support system. The last Congress, the things that got left on the negotiating floor are investments in housing and the care economy, paid leave, and early childhood education. And so we've got to have a series of bills on housing, on childcare, on paid leave, minimum wage that show that we recognize the economic challenges of this moment that people are facing. And then I got to say, those are the three big ones. But as someone who believes that we have to have next generation solutions, we have to make sure as we are moving forward that we are building out the framework for a modern economy that allows us to tap the potential positives and mitigate the very, very, very real risks of emerging technologies, from social media to, of course, artificial intelligence. And I'm in a group that's trying to come up with those solutions that don't stick our head in the sand and pretend like this change isn't happening and allow China to take the lead globally, but recognize that there are, yes, positives, but very real risks that we need federal action to prevent so that this new economy is safe for workers, safe for young people, safe for our planet. And I'm excited about some of the solutions that we're putting forward and coming up with that I think our new majority has to prioritize.
I love that so much. And I want to maybe end on where we kind of started about looking back 15 years, looking ahead 15 years. You've talked just about, first, just thank you for your clarity, Congresswoman, of just like of why we're doing this, of what Democrats stand for. I mean, it's just, it's so inspiring, honestly. And as we think about, what we're going to need for the next 15 years, I want to maybe pull two threads we were talking about together. One is what you were just talking about, which is the real challenges we're going to face over the next 15 years that, about how we modernize our economy, we deal with technology and take it, not just from a scared place, but from an opportunity place and all of those things. And then also talking about what you were talking about earlier about that politics is a rough sport right now for anybody in it. And so what is your advice and what is your, what would you tell both to the New Deal leaders who are out there, current New Deal leaders, future New Deal leaders, people who are thinking about running for office, about why it's so important to step up and serve and stay in this business at this time?
Well, the first is that what a blessing it is to do work that is fulfilling. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's not always fair. Yes, it's too often frustratingly slow. Yes, you lose your nights and your weekends and you deal with all of the extra challenges that come with it. But I know that at the end of my life, I want to look back and know that I did work that I not only found enjoyable, but deeply fulfilling and impactful. And for all of the challenges, there is nothing better there is nothing I think that all of us hope for more than to be able to live a life of purpose and meaning. And that can happen in any field, but there is no place where more avenues of society converge and where you can make more of an impact on more issues for more people than in politics. And then the second thing I'd say is that not only is it personally meaningful, but this is a unique moment. And I touched on this before, but we have to recognize the stakes right now, and not just the stakes because of the current occupant in the White House, but there are historical stakes in this moment. We're celebrating, as I mentioned, 250 years. And the time interval that's been in my mind as we celebrate 250 years is not just that, it's 80 years. Every 80 years, this country faces a very serious inflection point. From the Revolution to the Civil War, from the Civil War to the Great Depression and World War II to now today. And that's 80-year span is not a coincidence. It's a human life. And these inflection points happen when the last living memory of the previous inflection point fades away. And that is the moment we find ourselves in. And the challenge before us, as we face that inflection point, that choice between destroying and building, where every previous inflection point in our country's history, tragically through trial and through loss, sometimes through war, we've learned the lessons and we've chosen to build. The choice before us is to do politics through a different means. Politics not through war, but through the hard work of change making, to make sure that we are learning the lessons of history rather than reliving them, and to guarantee that those who are in the arena are willing to do that hard work of building in this moment, of proving that our democracy can deliver, so that we can write the next chapter in a way that doesn't result in tragedy or trial, but rather hope and opportunity and freedom for everyone.
Thank you. I mean, I can't think of a better conversation for the 250th anniversary of our country, or for the 15th anniversary of New Deal. And I just want to thank you so much for your service and your leadership. You are, it's such an important voice for this party and for our country. And I'm just so grateful to be your friend and to be working alongside you on this.
Well, the feeling is mutual. I'm so grateful to be on. I'm so grateful for the amazing work that both of you do and that New Dealers across the country are doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. And because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars were used in the making of this podcast.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.